Her hands trembled as the guards lifted her into the carriage. She was only 16 years old. Court records remember her as Consort Han, one of the Korean tribute women sent to the Ming Palace. That day, she had been surrendered to the Emperor of China. Her mother wept as she signed the document. She couldn't write, so she pressed an ink mark instead. One less daughter to feed, one less mouth to survive, another famine. Han spent weeks inside a sealed carriage with 15 other Korean maidens. They weren't allowed to look outside. They weren't allowed to speak. One girl tried to escape. The guards dragged her back and crushed her hand. Days later, infection killed her. Her body was abandoned beside the road. The others understood the lesson. Resistance was never an option. When the gates of the Forbidden City closed behind her, Han realized that serving the Son of Heaven had nothing to do with honor. She would spend the next 16 years trapped behind those walls. She would witness an entire harem vanish in a single night. She would beg for one final chance to see her mother, and she would die wrapped in white silk. Subscribe if you're new, and leave a like if you want us to keep uncovering stories like this, because what comes next is even worse. Han's story began the same way thousands of others did, inside a system built to harvest young women as if they were crops. When most people picture Chinese imperial concubines, they imagine elegance, beautiful women dressed in embroidered silk, writing poetry, living in luxury beside the most powerful man in Asia. That image is propaganda. The imperial concubine system lasted for more than 2,000 years. Across those centuries, tens of thousands of women disappeared behind the red walls of the Forbidden City. And this is what most people never realize. Concubines were not wives. Under imperial law, they were barely considered human. They were classified as valuable possessions, legally compared to porcelain vases. Every 3 years, imperial officials traveled across the provinces for what they called the selection of beauties. It sounds refined. It wasn't. This was never an audition. It was a state-organized harvest. During the Ming Dynasty, no family was exempt. Every unmarried girl of eligible age had to be presented. Hiding a daughter was considered treason, punishable by death for the entire family. Palace eunuchs and imperial physicians inspected every candidate. They examined every inch of her body. Birthmarks, scars, imperfections. Any flaw meant immediate rejection. Those who passed were taken away. Their families received only a token payment. Refusing that payment was treated as an act of treason against the emperor. The system rarely needed to kidnap anyone. Poverty did the work for it. And what became of the families left behind? Most never saw their daughters again. Letters were forbidden. Visits were impossible. On rare occasions, if a concubine rose high enough in rank, her family might receive a modest allowance. For almost everyone else, their daughter simply vanished behind the red walls. Some families even held funerals for daughters who were still alive, because they understood the truth. The girl they had raised no longer existed. Han arrived in China as part of another tribute mission. Korea sent women to the Ming Empire as part of diplomatic agreements. Between 1408 and 1435, more than 100 Korean women entered the Forbidden City, not as honored guests, as property. The moment Han crossed the palace gates, she stopped existing as a person. She became a number, a possession of the Son of Heaven. But before she could serve, she first had to be broken. The selected women never entered the harem immediately. Instead, they endured what the eunuchs called refinement, a process lasting anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. The first stage was the erasure of identity. Their hair was cut, a mark of deep dishonor in Chinese culture. Their names disappeared, replaced by numbers or generic titles. They were forbidden to speak about their families. Mentioning their mother brought immediate punishment. Every personal belonging from home was confiscated and burned. They slept in crowded barracks, 20 women to a room. They were awakened before dawn. They weren't allowed to sleep until well after midnight. Month after month, exhaustion became so complete that resisting was no longer physically possible. Then came the second stage, submission. The women memorized dozens of different bows. They practiced for 8 hours every day. A single mistake meant bamboo rods striking their legs. Many carried those scars for the rest of their lives. They learned to move without making a sound, to keep their eyes lowered, to answer only when spoken to exist without taking up space, to smile while they wanted to scream. One Ming Dynasty training manual listed 47 separate rules for standing in the emperor's presence. 47 different ways to exist in a single moment. Breaking even one rule brought punishment. Then came the third stage, preparation to serve the emperor. I won't describe the graphic details, but historical records reveal a systematic process designed to eliminate every trace of physical and psychological resistance. The women underwent monthly examinations. Those deemed inadequate were subjected to treatments that palace records describe with chilling clinical precision. Imperial medical files documented the procedures with disturbing detachment. Notes from 1723 mention candidates who showed resistance and preparation protocols that required repeated sessions. The cold, clinical language barely concealed what was happening to these women behind the palace walls. Official records discussed them with the same emotionless tone used to describe the training of animals. After months of this, the women who survived were declared ready to enter a world where their suffering had only begun. Once their training ended, the girls entered the official system, and with it came another kind of nightmare. The hierarchy was merciless. At the top stood the empress, the emperor's only official wife. Beneath her came the imperial consorts. Below them were the high-ranking concubines, divided into multiple tiers. At the very bottom were the common concubines, sometimes numbering in the hundreds, along with the preparation, women whose fate had yet to be decided. Your rank determined everything. The food you ate, the color of your robes, the size of your room, the number of servants assigned to you, even the dishes placed before you. The empress received more than 22 pounds of prime meat every day. A low-ranking concubine received barely 4 pounds, often even less. Corrupt eunuchs stole supplies long before they reached the kitchens. Many lower-ranking concubines slowly starved. Their teeth loosened, their hair thinned, their bodies withered. They seemed to age decades within only a few years. And the cruelest part was this: the more their appearance deteriorated, the less likely they were to ever be summoned. The system trapped them in a downward spiral with no escape. The emperor never visited his concubines. They were summoned each night. A chief eunuch presented the emperor with wooden tablets displaying the names and portraits of the available women. The emperor selected one, then the ritual began. The chosen concubine was escorted to the bathing palace. Female eunuchs bathed and prepared her, but they never dressed her again. Instead, they wrapped her in a silk blanket like a parcel, leaving only her face uncovered. Why? Because clothing could conceal a weapon. 2 eunuchs then carried her to the imperial chambers. At the foot of the bed, they unwrapped the blanket. Without clothing, the concubine was expected to crawl toward the emperor without ever raising her eyes. And here's what almost no one knows. A chief eunuch remained inside the room for the entire encounter, hidden behind a screen, but always present. His responsibility was to keep time. After exactly 30 minutes, he would announce in a loud voice, "Time to preserve the golden essence of the Son of Heaven." The emperor was expected to stop immediately. If he did not, the eunuch entered the chamber and physically removed the concubine. When it was over, an imperial physician examined the woman and carefully recorded every detail. Why? Because if she later became pregnant, there had to be unquestionable proof that the child belonged to the emperor. But this is what made the entire system truly perverse. Most concubines were never summoned. Not once. Not ever. There were hundreds of women inside the harem, sometimes more than 1,000. The emperor might choose only 1 or 2 each week. Do the math. A concubine could spend her entire life waiting for a summons that never came. She would grow old in silence, watch younger girls replace her, knowing the only reason she had been taken from her family would never be fulfilled. Yet she still couldn't leave. She couldn't marry. She couldn't bear children with anyone else. She existed as property placed into permanent storage, with nothing left to do except wait. Eventually, the women turned against one another. the imperial harem wasn't simply a prison. It was an arena, hundreds of women competing for the attention of one man. Every one of them knew that a single pregnancy could change everything, or destroy everything. The result was a hidden war that lasted for centuries. Concubines poisoned one another's food. They bribed eunuchs to remove rivals from the emperor's selection tablets. They spread rumors designed to push competitors out of favor. Historical records describe women secretly mixing abortifacients into the tea of pregnant rivals. If the baby died, the mother's future often died with it. Long before modern royal courts, the same ruthless logic already ruled the palace. Empress Wu Zetian, one of the very few women to rule China in her own name, was later accused of smothering her own newborn daughter before blaming the crime on a rival concubine. That woman was executed. Wu rose to become empress. Historians still debate whether the story is true, but the fact that so many believed it tells you everything about the culture inside the harem. The violence wasn't always physical. Psychological warfare never stopped. Senior concubines tormented younger ones. Imperial favorites were isolated, manipulated, and quietly undermined. Alliances formed just as quickly as they collapsed, often determined by nothing more than who the emperor glanced at during dinner. One Ming Dynasty account tells of a concubine who spent 3 years pretending to be a rival's closest friend, only to betray her when the empress launched an investigation into disloyalty. The rival was stripped of her rank, reduced to servant status. Her children were taken from her. This wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was survival. In a world where a woman's only source of power came from the emperor's favor, destroying your rivals became the only strategy that worked. That was the greatest tragedy of all. The system transformed victims into perpetrators. Women who had been seized, broken, and stripped of their humanity learned to inflict the same suffering on others because the alternative was becoming the next victim themselves. And if a concubine somehow survived that invisible war, if she finally caught the emperor's attention, if she became pregnant, that was when the real nightmare began. Here's the truth: almost no one expects. For a low-ranking concubine, pregnancy could become the worst fate imaginable. Common sense says carrying the emperor's child should have elevated her status. Reality was far crueler. The moment a concubine became pregnant, she was isolated inside the most remote palaces of the Forbidden City. For 9 months, she lived under constant surveillance. She couldn't receive visitors. She couldn't send letters. She couldn't even walk through the palace gardens. And when the child was finally born, it was taken from her immediately. If it was a boy, he was handed over to wet nurses and raised far away from his biological mother. She might see him once or twice a year, always supervised by eunuchs, never allowed to hold him freely. If the baby was a girl, many simply vanished. Imperial records rarely bothered to record the fate of daughters born to low-ranking concubines. Some documents describe women so desperate to escape this cycle that they secretly consumed abortifacient herbs. They chose to risk death rather than bring another daughter into the same system that had destroyed them. And if a son died, the mother was often blamed. She could be accused of negligence, sometimes even murder. Even when children died from ordinary illnesses, the mother could be demoted, exiled to distant palaces, or punished even more severely. One concubine during the Qing dynasty lost 3 children to smallpox. Instead of sympathy, she was accused of carrying poisoned karma. She spent the next 40 years confined to a single room, forbidden from seeing another member of the imperial family. Her crime was burying her children. Her punishment was dying alone. But as brutal as daily life inside the harem already was, nothing could prepare the women for what happened in 1421. That year, Emperor Yongle had just inaugurated the Forbidden City. His power had never been greater. Then, a single rumor destroyed thousands of lives. One of the emperor's favorite concubines was found dead. Officially, the court declared she had been poisoned. But whispers spread through the palace. They claimed she had taken her own life after an affair with a palace eunuch. Worse still, they claimed the affair exposed the emperor's impotence. Yongle erupted. Humiliated, paranoid, consumed by rage, he ordered an investigation, not to uncover the truth, but to silence anyone who might have heard the rumor. In a single night, 2,800 women inside the harem were executed, not only concubines, laundresses, any woman who might have known something or simply heard something. The chosen method was death by 1,000 cuts, an execution deliberately designed to prolong suffering. The executioners were ordered to make it last. Some victims took hours to die. Their screams echoed across the entire palace complex. Girls as young as 12 were slaughtered. Women who had served the palace for decades, pregnant concubines, none of it mattered. Anyone who might have known, anyone who might have spoken, was condemned. By dawn, servants washed the courtyards with buckets of water drawn from the palace wells. The very same wells where, in later generations, countless women would choose to end their own lives. No official imperial record mentions this massacre. The Ming court erased it from history, but one voice survived. Lady Choi, a concubine who happened to be outside the palace that night, visiting a sick relative. She escaped the purge by pure chance. Years later, Lady Choi recounted everything to a Korean envoy. She described screams that continued until sunrise, courtyards slick with blood, eunuchs dragging bodies through hallways she had walked every day. She named women she had known, girls she had trained beside, friends who had shared meals with her. Her testimony survived in Korean diplomatic archives, beyond the reach of Ming censors. Today, it remains one of the only first-hand accounts of that night. Lady Choi's escape, however, was only temporary. 3 years later, when Emperor Yongle died, she was chosen for accompanying sacrifice. Her final recorded words, preserved by the same Korean envoy, were haunting. "I survived the night of blood only to die in silk." Han, the young Korean woman whose story we have followed, also survived the massacre. She was among the few who escaped execution, but her relief lasted only 3 years. When Emperor Yongle died, Han's name appeared on the list of women selected for eternal honor. During the Ming Dynasty, a practice known as Hushunzang, accompanying sacrifice, still existed. When an emperor died, his favored concubines were buried alive beside him. The logic behind it was horrifyingly simple. The emperor would need company in the afterlife. And who better to accompany him than the women who had spent their lives serving his desires? 3 days after the emperor's death, the eunuchs compiled the list of those who had been chosen. Depending on the emperor, anywhere between 5 and 30 women were selected. Before their deaths, they were served one final, lavish banquet. Delicacies they had never been allowed to taste. Wine they had rarely been permitted to drink. Some accounts even describe musicians performing while the women ate, as though the occasion were a celebration instead of a funeral. Then came the choice. The first option was to hang themselves willingly with white silk cords. This was considered the honorable death. Their families received financial compensation and official recognition. Some families even urged their daughters to accept willingly, knowing the alternative would be far worse. The second option was refusal. In that case, the eunuchs either hanged them by force or drugged them with opium until they lost consciousness. Their bodies, some still drawing breath, were arranged in seated positions inside chambers surrounding the emperor's tomb, placed as though they were still waiting, still attending, still serving, even in death. In 1958, archaeologists opened the tomb of Emperor Jingtai. Inside, they